Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the afternoon. Welcome back to the second session of today. And I hope that all of you had a nice tea break. And a very warm welcome to our next visiting lecturer for today, Mr. Sagar, who is currently serving as Deputy CVO, Deputy Chief Vigilance Officer Electrical in Northeastern Railway. Sir was actually sir actually has spent quite some time in vigilance now, and he has considerable experience with dealing dealing with various vigilance aspects of tender cases. And he has prepared some case studies which we can all discuss. Additionally, sir has experience outside of vigilance in the field, both in the workshop as AWE and then later DWE workshop of Izzatnagar workshop in Northeastern Railway, as well as after that in the open line as DTRD as well as senior DE of the electric loco shed in Gorakhpur, which was a project being undertaken on on a capital basis, and which presented its own set of problems and issues, which sir did considerable work in solving. So so sir is quite conversant with the problems of field officers and supervisors, as well as the way vigilance functions, and the view that vigilance takes. And this is a topic that I think is something many people have also asked for it. Sir, this course consists of about 50 odd participants. I mean, the remaining few are just joining. 50 odd participants, of whom about 15 or 16 are officers up to the level of J grade. Mostly junior scale and senior scale, with 2 or 3 J grade officers as well, branch officers. And the remaining are supervisors from various railways, specifically mostly Northern Railway, Southern Railway. Yeah, please, whoever is unmuted, please mute. I'm so sorry, sir. And so mostly they are from Northern Railway, Southern Railway, and RWF Bangalore, and some chief OS and chief OS as well. Sir, without any further delay, sir, over to you, sir. The floor is yours. Please, sir, go ahead.
Thank you, Shashwat. I welcome all the participants in this course and especially in this lecture. I hope you will all enjoy this class. So let's start. Vigilance aspects in tenders and contracts. Now, before we begin, let's establish some ground rules. Ask whatever comes in your mind, obviously. Next. Interaction is a must, and then have fun. So let's start. Now, the first question that comes in front of us is that why vigilance? Why do we need a vigilance organization? And especially in railways or in government organizations, vigilance is everywhere. So in order to understand the answer to this question, let's look at the statistics that I have given in this presentation, this slide. So in this slide, you can see that there are two tables. The first table on the left, it is showing the top 10 countries, top 10 or 11 countries, according to the Corruption Perceptions Index that is made by Transparency International, that is NGO. And the table on the right are the lowest ranking 10 countries that are lowest ranking 10 countries according to the Corruption Perceptions Index. Now, unfortunately, India is not in the left table, and fortunately, we are not in the right table. So, vigilance plays a role here. What is the perception in the mind of people, in the mind of citizens of the country? This perception changes according to the watchdog or the people or the government, how it is working and how it is using its funds and how it is using its resources. After seeing this table on this slide, you may wonder where is India in this whole scenario. So now you can see that India, the score of India in Corruption Perceptions Index is 40 out of 100 and the rank is 85 out of 180. So we are somewhere in the middle. Also, in the table, the score changes that I have seen that I have shown. You can see that the score is gradually increasing. From 2013 to 2019, it has increased, and in 2020, it has fallen a bit. So overall, we are in the middle and we are performing well. But how can we perform better? How can we come in the top 10 countries? That way, that pathway, that is told by CVC or the Vigilance Department. That's what the purpose of vigilance is, to make people aware of the things that should be done and also the things that should not be done. Also, the dangers of corruption, the problems that corruption creates for a nation, it is huge. As you can see in these days, our neighboring country Sri Lanka is facing an extreme problem, and corruption is one of the major issues that was haunting that country. So, in order to prevent any such scenario from happening anywhere in the world, the vigilance departments or the vigilance organizations in those places, they work hard so that no such scenario should come in front of those countries. Now that is a global picture, and now that can give you a bigger picture. Now coming to our organization or Indian Railways or maybe the government organizations, why do we have vigilance? So basically, vigilance is an integral function of any organization. As I have already said, that the funds that any organization receives, how it is using those funds, whether some people are utilizing their position in a wrong way, or maybe they are using those funds for their own personal benefits, or maybe or maybe benefits of some particular persons. This must be avoided. The leakage of the funds, the leakage of the resources. Now, this is the thing that can eat away an organization, and it must not happen. So, vigilance administration comprises of preventive as well as punitive anti-corruption measures. When we say preventive and punitive, that means not only vigilance gives punishment to the wrongdoers, or in other words, it recommends punishment for the wrongdoers, but also it prevents these kind of happenings, such kind of happenings. So not only we, as vigilance organization, punishes those, we also try to prevent these kind of wrongdoings from happening. Now, one question that comes in our mind is how can we prevent? So the answer to that question lies in the third paragraph, that it includes detecting irregularities, analyzing and finding out reasons for such irregularities, and making effective systemic improvements to curb them. It also entails identifying the public servants responsible for misconduct and taking appropriate punitive actions. So what happens is that vigilance, when a case comes to us and we identify that there were some loopholes in the system due to which some particular official was able to do the wrong thing, or maybe the irregularity that was done by him, it was because of a loophole present in the system. So we try to plug that loophole so that no one in future can do this thing again, because only punishment will not be is I'm or am I audible, or my voice is breaking or something? Someone has messaged that my voice is not audible. Can anyone confirm, please? Ashwat, I think
Yes, sir.
I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much. So as I was saying, that system improvements are an important part of the preventive measures that vigilance adopts. Now, before we start on the tenders and contracts part, I think you should know that how does a vigilance case starts. Now, the genesis of a vigilance case comes from two directions. Now, one is preventive checks, and the other one is complaints, as you can see on the screen. Preventive checks are the checks that are done by vigilance by itself. The checks may be due to these could be some random checks, or these could be also the result of some source information. In preventive checks, what happens is that the CVI. The CVI means Chief Vigilance Inspector. CVI, not CVI. The Chief Vigilance Inspector will visit some office and he will gather some records, gather some evidences. He may also go to the work sites in case of any contract or any work going on, and he will check. He can check anything. He can check, let's say, in the work agreement something is written, and then he will check whether the work is being done according to the agreement or not, whether the work is being done according to specification or not. Now these come under preventive checks. Now the second part is complaints. We also receive complaints from general public, complaints from anyone. Literally anyone can send a complaint to vigilance. Now these complaints are also of two types: general complaints, and then there are PIDP complaints. What is the difference between these two? In fact, there is one more category that is called CA3 complaints. I have not written here, but I will tell you about that also. General complaints are general complaints, like the name suggests what it is. Anyone can send a complaint to vigilance, and that will be investigated. Now, the second one is PIDP complaint. PIDP stands for Public Interest Disclosure and Protection of Informers. Now, this was an ordinance that was passed after the death of a whistleblower. So CVC and Government of India decided that whistleblowers must not be punished or must not be targeted, since they tried to uncover a scam or something going on in the system. So what happens in PIDP complaints is that we, as vigilance officers in zonal railways, we don't get to know the identity of the complainant. We only get the text of the complaint, what are the facts that we have to investigate, and this complaint is sent to us from CVC. So we receive this complaint directly from CVC. And also, if anyone has to make a PDP complaint, then he has to send the complaint direct to CVC. In case someone sends a complaint to us, we will simply send that sealed envelope forward back to CVC. We don't have to open this envelope, zonal vigilance or even a railroad. The third one is CA3 complaint. CA3 complaint comes from MP, MLAs, I mean the VIPs. It can come from President of India or Prime Minister or any kind of dignitaries. And depending on the category of the CA3, there are 4 or 5 categories depending on the rank or level of those VIPs. The CA3 complaints are handled. The main difference between general complaints and this PDP or CA3 complaint is genuineness verification. What is this genuineness verification? You might be wondering is that if I want to, let's say a person A wants to disturb a particular official, he'll just write something, a random complaint, and he'll send to vigilance without signing or giving his name. And then vigilance will just start checking that official. So that can harass that official, but that will not happen, because what happens is that in general complaints, all the complaints that are received must be signed, and it should have a proper name and contact address of the complainant. So whenever we receive a complaint, we will confirm by sending a letter to the complainant that whether you have made this complaint, please confirm. Unless he confirms, the complaint will not be investigated. CVC has clearly instructed that all the anonymous or pseudonymous complaint can be anonymous. It can also be pseudonymous. Suppose a person A writes a complaint in the name of person C. In that case, the genuineness verification will fail. So that will also be treated as a pseudonymous complaint, and a pseudonymous complaint will also not be investigated. It will be simply filed. However, it may happen that the vigilance may find that the facts that were in the complaint may be true, and it may conduct a preventive checks afterwards. That depends on the vigilance official. But mostly such complaints are filed and no action is taken. So if you have any doubt that anyone can anonymously write a letter to vigilance and then you may be harassed, that will not happen. That will not. So you can work fearlessly, but if you are working with your good intentions and Your motives are good. You are working according to the conduct rules. You don't have to worry about anything, and you can work. You can work as per your liking. Okay. The next question is, what does vigilance checks in any case? Now, you must know that vigilance is a recommending authority. Vigilance by itself never gives charge sheet to anyone. Whenever we find that there is, just excuse me. नहीं बहुत बस उसमें नाम देता है, उसका सर्टिफाई करेगा कि हमने इतना इतना पैसा सबमिट कर जाते हैं ना। हाँ सर, एक हम क्लास ले रहे हैं, थोड़ा आपको कॉल करते हैं। ठीक है, ठीक। I'm sorry, I was there was just a call, sorry. So I was telling is that whenever there is a vigilance investigation, what is the purpose of that investigation? What do we look for? So we look for an irregularity. Now, what is the irregularity? What is the meaning of that irregularity? In order to understand that, we should know a little about DAR also. So I was telling that vigilance always recommends punishment to anyone. It never gives directly charge sheet to anyone. No one will receive charge sheet directly signed by a vigilance officer. He will always receive the charge sheet signed by the respective disciplinary authority. So a DAR case can be taken up against any official only in case of a codal provision violation or conduct rule violation. So vigilance will check for any kind of violation of codal provisions or conduct rules in any case. So that is what vigilance looks. So if there are violation of any codal provision or conduct rule, that will be known as an irregularity. Now, that will not be enough to decide the charges or the punishment that the charges that will be recommended by vigilance. The main purpose of vigilance is to identify whether there is a vigilance angle in the case. Irregularity and vigilance angle are two different things. They are not same. Consider it like two boxes. Irregularity is a bigger box and vigilance angle is a smaller box. Now this smaller box can fit inside the bigger box. So there can be a vigilance angle in the case. If there is a vigilance angle in the case, there must be some irregularity. But if there is an irregularity in the case, it is not necessary that there will be a vigilance angle. Now, how to decide whether vigilance angle is present in the case or not? For that, the definition of vigilance angle has been given. This definition has been given by the CBC manual. It was already in the CBC manual 2018 and still in the manual 2021. And based on that CBC manual, we have an Indian Railways Vigilance Manual. In that manual also, we have a clear-cut definition of the vigilance angle, which I am going to show. Now, vigilance angle. The first point is demanding and or accepting gratification other than legal remuneration in respect of an official act or for using his influence with any other official. Now, this is a clear-cut point. If anyone is caught accepting gratification or demanding gratification, you can see that someone may have demanded for some gratification. Someone may have demanded for bribe. He might not have received that bribe, but even if he has demanded it and it can be proved that he has demanded the bribe, he will be held responsible and vigilance angle will be present in the case. Next is obtaining any valuable thing without consideration or with inadequate consideration from a person with whom he has or is likely to have official dealings or with whom his subordinates have official dealings or where he can exert influence. Now, the second point is if some government official has obtained any valuable thing, this valuable thing can be material or like can be immaterial also. The point is that it should be without consideration or with inadequate consideration. Consideration means what are you giving in return? So that is the term with consideration. So, and also this should come from a person with whom he has an official deal or likely to have an official deal. So that will also be counted as a vigilance. Obtaining for himself or for any other person any valuable thing or pecuniary advantage by corrupt or illegal means or by abusing his position as a public servant. I think these points are self-explanatory in nature. If you find, if you have any doubt in these points, you can always ask. I'm ready to answer any questions that may come in your mind at any point of time in the presentation. Now, the possession of disproportionate assets to his known sources of income. As we all know that all the officers have to declare their IPR. And I think as far as I know, all the I mean super group C staff with pay scale above 4600 have to also declare their IPR. I don't know whether it is happening every day. The point is that if someone has assets disproportionate to his known sources of income, then he will also be caught in he will also be called to be present that in that case of vigilance angle is present. You may also find it interesting to know that CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation, checks for these two points. I mean, disproportionate assets and demanding and or accepting gratification. So CBI, when CBI raids are done, CBI checks for either of these two points or maybe both of these. And in those cases, for checking this disproportionate assets and or is in demanding or accepting gratification, CBI can do random. I mean, they can do raids. Cases of misappropriation, forgery, or cheating, or other similar criminal offenses. I think these are all self-explanatory nature. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. EBC has mentioned other irregularities where circumstances will have to be weighed carefully to take a view whether the officer's integrity is in doubt. Quite obviously, the list that was shown in the last slide was not exhaustive. There can be many circumstances, there can be many conditions where each aspect of the circumstance will have to be considered carefully by the concerned vigilance officials. These include cases of gross or willful negligence, recklessness in decision making, blatant violations of systems and procedures, exercise of discretion in excess, where no ostensible public interest is evident, failure to keep the controlling authority or superiors informed. This paragraph single-handedly expands the scope of vigilance angle a much larger extent. Because this paragraph can, if you read this paragraph, you will see that this is much similar. This is much similar to the conduct rule para 3, first, second, and third, where unbecoming of railway servant and because where the para regarding unbecoming of railway servant and many other things have been given. So whenever vigilance angle is established in a case, it is checked if any of these factors are present in the case. If none of these factors are present in the case, then it is said that vigilance angle is not present in the case, and only irregularity is present, or maybe irregularity is also not present in some cases. In this, those cases are simply closed. So that was about irregularity, vigilance angle, and the vigilance administration. So if there are questions, if there are some questions, anyone wants to ask any questions, you can ask, please. Questions? This class is about vigilance aspects in tenders and contracts. The question that comes in our mind is, why do we have a vigilance class in a tenders and contract course? I mean, we don't have vigilance class in other courses. We don't have vigilance class in, let's say, whatever, in maybe power electronics course, or maybe train lighting course. We have vigilance class in tenders and contracts. Why so? The reason is that in tenders and contracts, the officials involved have got some discretionary powers, and these discretionary powers can be misused by those officials. Now, there will be some who will misuse this. They are corrupt. They are the wrong persons. But not all the officials, not all the officers are like that. So people who are not, they, people who don't have a wrong intention, they must know that where they can be at fault, and they can be vigilant. They can be cautious while dealing the tenders and contracts cases, so that in the future, when any vigilance investigation happens, they may not be held responsible. Because when vigilance investigation happens, it is done based on the present evidences, the evidences that are on paper. And based on those evidences, it is very difficult to identify whether the intention of that official was good or bad. So if your intention is good, it is a very unfortunate situation that your documents prove otherwise. You will be demotivated, and also you'll find that your all your effort have gone in vain. That must not happen. That's why we have a class on vigilance in this tenders and contracts cases. The purpose is not to uh, make you fearful or make you afraid. The purpose is to make you fearless by letting you know the points that you should be that you should keep in your mind and work fearlessly. That okay, even if a complaint happens, even if a vigilance investigation happens, I know that I'm right. I've done everything right. So I don't have to worry. That is the purpose of this class. So now let's move forward. In a previous slide, I have shown that the genesis of a vigilance case comes from two areas. One is a complaint and other one is preventive checks. In case of preventive checks, Railway Board, I mean the Vigilance Directorate of Railway, it identifies some areas where there is a higher probability of corruption or irregularities happening. These areas are identified and these are notified every year. This is known as thrust areas. It is for the vigilance department. We have to check. We have to do more checks in those areas. We can always check in other areas, but according to Railway Board, these are the areas which are more susceptible to vigilance angle cases. I am showing these list. I am showing this list to you in order to make you understand that the whole. It's not the complete list that I am showing, but almost half of the list contains the parameters, contains the areas that are directly or indirectly related to tenders and contracts, and that also supports the fact that why we have a vigilance class in a tenders and contracts course. So you can see on your screen scrutiny of expenditure contracts covering all departments for each of the following categories: compliance of prescribed norms or guidelines issued from Railway Board for IRWCMS, IREPS, IMMS, IPAS, etc. In quality check of safety items on coaches, loco, and wagons, irregularity in eligibility criteria, duplicacy or unrealistic assessment of work in estimates and tender schedule, outsourced maintenance of electric locomotive parts, quality check of supply of machine materials, quality check of signaling of power cables. You can see that some of the thrust areas belong to material procurement. Now, material procurement is also done through tenders and contracts. That is the West Coast department. So that's why I have also shown here these thrust areas. Quality check of consigned inspected telecom materials, emphasis on logical contract with complaints on old and expired contract, focus on non-fair revenue from land resources, scrutiny of manpower-based contracts, scrutiny of contracts where variation is over and above 25%, scrutiny of tender decided beyond 30 days of original validity, online finalization of tenders in IRIPS, scrutiny of manpower in service contracts, use of IRWCMS for works to service contracts, checking of energy meters provided to vendors of firms. Then the point number 2 comes that in order to cover large value works, these are mostly related to the bigger contracts. Action on cartelization relevant to stores engineering departments, regularity in inspection of material by consignee rights and RDSO, scrutiny of both non-stock and stock procurement cases, scrutiny of lodging and handling of warranty claims, verification of import documents, routine check of delivery of scrap, vendor approval system, genuineness of OEMs, preventive check of gem purchase, observance of guidelines or circulation from Railway Board regarding procurement of gem, bill passing of contract, entries of measurement book. So these are the thrust areas which are related to tenders and contracts. Now, after this tenders, after this list, there is a list related to other areas also, like personal accounts and RPF security that are not directly related to tenders and contracts. So the point is, tenders and contracts have to be dealt with and according to the rules and guidelines. And how those rules and guidelines can be misused or may be misinterpreted by the officials, that will be that I will discuss in these 3 case studies that I am going to discuss. These case studies are taken from some cases. These are not exactly the cases. I have given a small summary of those cases, but you will get an idea. Also, you will see in these case studies that it is difficult to identify whether the official has done this on purpose or it was done by mistake. So the first case study, a tender was published for outsourcing of shop floor cleaning. Outsourcing of shop floor cleaning happens almost everywhere. The shop floor can be a workshop, or it can be of a logo shed, or it can be of a coaching. And it can be done anywhere. In LAR, unit of measurement was square meter. The last accepted rate that they used for preparation of estimate for this. That LAR, the unit of measurement was written as square meter. In the tender schedule, unit of measurement was taken as square feet. So what happened is that when they made the schedule, they wrote the unit of measurement as a square feet instead of a square meter. But what happened is that they used that same unit cost while they changed the unit of measurement. For example, if it was 10 rupees per square meter, now in this tender they use 10 rupees per square feet. So if you can understand it, you'll find that now they have increased the unit rate by a substantial amount. 10 rupees per square meter is changed to 10 rupees square feet. So in square meter, it will be changed by substantial. And tender opened, the lowest tender offered at 1% below the schedule price, which was accepted. And was issued. Now, I want to ask you now, who do you think did the mistake? Or if I can say it otherwise, where did the mistake? Or where can it be corrected? Where could it have been corrected? Can anyone please answer?
Participants, please ask your questions and give your answers. Let us keep the session interactive. If anybody has any idea, there's no right or wrong answer. Does anybody have any idea where this situation could have been improved? If anyone, please go ahead.
You can just speak, that will be better.
Shwetab has written in the chat, sir. During vetting by accounts, these aspects can be raised in accounts observation. Thank you, Shwetab. Participants, please come up.
Mr. Shwetab has said that during vetting by accounts, these aspects can be raised in accounts observation. You're right. But where this mistake has happened in this case, point is this. Someone was making the tender schedule, someone was making the tender schedule and he did that. Do you think that there is a vigilance angle present in this case? How many of you think that there is a vigilance angle present or maybe absent? I've told you about vigilance angle, and more or less I think you understand what vigilance angle stands. Vigilance angle means that quite obviously there is someone who has a bad intention. Do you think that there are bad intentions involved in this case? Okay, I I think. Okay, so my reply to this question is that you cannot understand or you cannot predict in this case that vigilance angle is present. The reason is if someone is changing the units in the scope of work, he may not decide at that point that who will get the work, because at the time of preparation of the tender schedule, the tender, the publishing of tender and the awarding of tender is still a long way to go. And I don't think there is any merits in the case as to he cannot predict or he cannot get personal benefits from this case by changing the units in the case. So in my view, it was just a mistake and not the case did not have any vigilance. You think otherwise, you can tell me, otherwise we will move on. So let's move on to the second case. Contract was done for coach conversion of the items to be supplied by contractor. One of the items to be supplied by contractor was to be rights inspector. So the contract was done for coach conversion, and the items that was to be supplied was to be rights inspected. We all know that the material has to be either rights inspected or it has to be inspected by consignee depending on the value of the item. So in this case, the value of the item dictated that it has to be inspected by rights. Contractor was delaying supply of the material and executive was under pressure to get the job done in time to upcoming inspection. We all know that whenever there is an inspection, we all are under heavy pressure to get the work done on time. So the executive was also under pressure to get the job done on time. Now, what the contractor did, he first of all delayed supplying that material for a long time. And after a lot of delay, contractor informed that material is now ready for rights inspection, but it will take time. And hence, he proposed that let's change the inspection criteria. And instead of getting it inspected from rights, let's get it inspected from a third party. That's what the contractor proposed. He proposed to the executive. Now, as an executive, remember that executive was under a lot of pressure due to upcoming inspection. The material was getting delayed. The contractor is promising that the material will be handed over quite soon if he changes the inspection criteria. What happened is that the branch officer accepted the proposal. Not only he accepted the proposal, he wrote on the noting that one sample of the item to be sent to the third party lab for inspection and payment of the item to be released. Now, if you think about this case, you will see that what the branch officer wrote on the noting was too brave. I mean, writing this on noting, I think this is not correct. This should not be done. What he wrote is that one sample of the item to be sent to the third party. So in short, he accepted the proposal of the contractor. He said, okay, let's, instead of sending the material to RITES for inspection, let's send it to some third party lab, which the contractor proposed. And the second point is that the payment of the item to be released. Now, these 2 points single-handedly defined vigilance angle in this case. Because if you think about it, obviously the executive was under pressure, but it was not that he was out of alternatives. He had some alternatives. He could get the inspection criteria changed through proper approvals by the getting approval from competent authority, but he never did that. Instead, he simply took the decision by himself that let's change the inspection agency. Not only he changed the inspecting agency, he also wrote that one sample of the item to be sent. The sampling in any case is defined according to the IS that is written in the document or the relevant IS. In this case, the relevant IS in standard dictated that 25, the sample will consist of 25 number of those items. He instead sent one sample of the item. Also, that what I have not written in this case is that what happened is when that one sample of item was sent for testing in that third party lab, that sample was rejected. I mean, that sample failed. Now, what he should do? He should tell that, okay, your lot has failed. He should inform the contractor that your lot has failed. Now change the lot or may reject the material. He never did that also. What he did instead of that is that he sent another sample from that same lot. So one sample failed. He sent second sample from that same lot to that same third party lab. And when that second sample was sent to the third party lab, that sample was passed. And based on that pass certificate, he accepted the whole material. In addition to this, since in the noting he had already instructed that payment of the item to be released, the payment for the item was also released even before the item was provided or the erection of the item, the testing and commissioning of the item was done. Now, if you can see, this is a clear-cut case of vigilance. There is no ostensible public benefit involved in this case. That is that's why I mean, there is no reasoning, there is no public benefit involved why any executive should take such a decision. This is a hasty decision. This is a decision without taking into consideration many other conditions. The public fund, the government fund that has been given under your custody, like misuse of those, because in this case, third quality material was received and that was commissioned. Now, the third case.
Sir, I have a couple of questions regarding this, sir.
Yes.
Sir, in the previous case study, by changing the inspection criteria, ultimately contractor was changing the contractor was asking for a change in tender conditions, and that is what was agreed to effectively. So I mean, the same thing would have applied if he had said कि नहीं मैं आपको material गोरखपुर में नहीं दे पाऊंगा, मैं लखनऊ तक आके उतार दूंगा. He could have the same condition, I think, would have applied under tender rules. So, sir, जब टेंडर कंडीशंस में जब हम चेंज करते हैं तो क्या हम लोग ये do we need to go for a fresh tender altogether, or is it possible under some conditions with finance concurrence or an approval of tender accepting authority or something?
The post-tender, I mean, post-agreement variations can be done, but they should not be done except in very emergency or very specific situation. They should be avoided at all costs. And as far as your question is there, that if the contractor wants to supply material to, let's say, city B instead of city A,
Sir,
so it depends on what is written in the tender sheet, what is written in the agreement. If there is written about, if there is something written in the agreement, then we should go according to that. If there is nothing written in the agreement, we should not agree. Our first line of action should be to reject any kind of post agreement variations in the
sir.
not recommended.
Sir,
Because
actually there is, sir, please sir, go ahead. Sorry, sir.
it's because this gives a lot of discretionary power to the executive. Because if you can change the conditions after agreement is done, then some other party, some third party, may start saying that, okay, this was the condition, that's why I did not participated in the tender, and now you have changed this condition for the benefit of that party. And at that point, it will be difficult to understand the situation of the executive, whether he has done for bona fide intentions or mala fide intentions.
Sir.
So that is the reason it should be done in a very emergency situation, and also proper approvals from competent authorities.
Got it, sir. Got it, sir. Actually, sir, there is a similar, long time ago, but there is about 10 years ago, there was a similar kind of situation. That's why I asked this question, in which it was one store's contract executed by one of the northern railways, northern or north central or one of these. And finally, the thing was for supply of material up to, I think, Agra. I'm not sure, Agra or Jaipur or one of these. And the contractor last minute, he said, मैं वहां तक तो नहीं दे पाऊंगा, मैं दिल्ली में उतार दूंगा, दिल्ली से आप डिपार्टमेंटली उठवा लीजिए. And the concerned officer, it was a J grade stores officer, the concerned officer agreed कि ठीक है हम उठवा लेंगे. And departmentally उन्होंने उठवाया, and then that became a vigilance case, and then that became a sort of a cautionary tale for everybody कि वो नहीं करना.
Yes, because ऐसे cases में the executive can also do one thing. If I'm an executive and I have no other option, I think that this is the only possible way to get this work done.
Sir.
So I should write in clear terms. I should make a speaking. That should explain why I am going to do this, and that should justify without any doubt that why I am doing this. There is no other way available. So if unfortunately a vigilance investigation happens in that case, the vigilance will find that noting, vigilance will read that noting, and it will understand that he has done this under such and such circumstances, due to which it was not possible to go otherwise. Because we have to see this, that we are like custodian of a public fund.
Sir.
If a supplier is telling that I am not going to supply so and so material to this place, instead I am supplying to some other place. So if let's say I cancel this order and I go for retender.
Yes, sir.
So I can compare these two alternatives that are available, which will be more beneficial for this government funds. Maybe maybe I can deduct some of the charges, some of the charges that was to be payable to the contractor, and by deducting that I can change the delivery location. But obviously it depends on case to case basis. Every case has to be judged according to the merits.
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely, sir. Got it, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
So now the third case study. Vigilance preventive check was conducted in interlocking work of level crossing gates installed in one of the divisions. was found that supply and installation of lifting barrier was covered under the agreement of the subject work, but lifting barrier was already installed at that level. This means that the abstract or detailed estimate of the work was prepared without proper. I think you understand what is happening in this case study. Lifting barrier were to be provided according to a contract, but when checked, it was found that at some of the locations, not all of the locations, the lifting barrier was already provided. Obviously, if the lifting barrier is provided at that location, the work cannot be done there. Or otherwise, what the contractor will do, he will just replace that lifting barrier. And since there is no mention of an existing barrier, he will just seize that lifting barrier and he will sell it to some other places, or maybe he obviously that will be like theft of it. This was done because the estimation of the work was not done. If estimation of a work is being done, it must be made sure that the work is required. This is the first question that one has to ask. The first question that the site supervisor has to ask. The first question that the concerned executive officer has to ask. Whether the work is required or not. And if the work is not required, don't go for it. Why are you going to spend so much public funds, so much public money on a work that is already done and you are going for that work again? So that is clearly a case of vigilance angle. Because unless and until there will be two reasons for going to either you are very irresponsible official, you don't care about the public funds, you are just going like carelessly, okay, this work has to be done, and the site supervisor has not done site survey properly. He has just sent some group D helper or someone to just go and see how many of those lifting barrier were to be provided, and he never visited the site himself, or the executive is also not interested in knowing about the site conditions. So complete details of some of the items were not given in the tender, and it was directed to supply the goods as per the description given in the catalog of a particular, not generic. Not only that, complete details of some of the items were not given in the tender. If you're not giving complete details of the item in the tender, how do you expect the supplier to supply those materials? Also, it was directed to supply the goods as per the description given in the catalog of a particular firm. So instead of writing a generic specification, it was directed to supply the goods as per description given in the catalog of a particular firm. So there were many irregularities in this case, and as I have already said, the vigilance angle is also evident in this case. So these are the kind of mistakes, these are the kind of wrongdoings that are done by officials. And the purpose of telling these case studies to you, make you aware that how these mistakes can be done. It is possible that the site supervisor in this case, his intention was not very bad. He was just a lazy supervisor, or maybe he was just an irresponsible who did not did his site who did not check the site conditions thoroughly. But on paper, in the documents, the documentary evidence, through documentary evidence, it is very hard to prove whether his intentions were good or bad. And as per the definition of vigilance angle is present in the case. So the recommendations of major penalty charge sheet will be against the concerned person. So whenever you are dealing with tenders and cases, you may be a site supervisor, you may be an officer. You should pay attention to these areas. Now, what is the solution? I have talked about 3 cases here, and I have told you the irregularities or vigilance angles that were present. Solution is knowledge of conduct rules and knowledge of codal procedures. Someone wants to ask something?
Please go ahead. Mr. Shiv Kumar, go ahead, please.
I think his mic.
Somebody wanted to ask a question, I think. Someone wanted to ask a question. Whoever wants to ask a question, please go ahead. कोई कुछ पूछना चाह रहा है तो please go ahead. शिव कुमार.
अगर आप कुछ भी सवाल पूछना चाहते हैं आप पूछ लीजिए, कोई इसमें दिक्कत की बात नहीं. So
I think you can go ahead, Mr. Shiv Kumar, if you have any questions, or if anybody has any questions, please type them in the chat. We will take them. No issues.
okay, so what is the solution? The solution is knowledge.
No, sir. No.
If you have knowledge of codal provisions, it is very unlikely that you will do these kind of mistakes, because in most of the cases I have seen that the supervisors or the officers are not aware of the codal provisions. So here I will tell you some of the codal provisions and some of the important CVC guidelines regarding the tenders and contracts. And apart from the other railway documents regarding the tenders and documents, regarding tenders and contracts, this will help you in identifying the areas where you should be more cautious. First thing is canons of financial propriety. If you are an officer, you must have studied this during your foundation or induction, because canons of financial propriety are the most basic foundation on which the whole government works. We are working in a capacity as a government officer or official, and we are custodian of the book. So if I am acting as a custodian of public funds, I will have to make sure that those public funds are utilized as judiciously and as effectively as possible. That's what the canons of financial propriety is all about. These fundamentals, if you happen to forget all the codal provisions and everything, these canons of financial propriety should be in your mind, and use these canons as a base for your judgment. If a case comes in front of you, I will tell you some of the main fundamental concepts, and based on these concepts you can apply your mind and identify what has to be done. First, start with this. We'll start with canons of financial propriety. Every officer is expected to exercise the same vigilance in respect of expenditure incurred from public money as a person of ordinary prudence would exercise in respect of expenditure of his own money. This first paragraph is enough in itself. Let's ask ourselves, how many times have we spent public money like we would have spent our own money? The prudence, the vigilant attitude, the attitude that we show for our own money, do we show that kind of attitude for the public money also? Whenever we are going for any tender or contract, we should, like all the three case studies that I have discussed before. In the first case study, the unit was written. Suppose you are going to a shop to purchase, let's say, sugar. You want 1 kilogram of sugar. If the shopkeeper, instead of giving you the rate of 1 kilogram of sugar, he tells you the rate of 1 quintal of sugar, will you be willing to purchase the sugar at that rate? I mean, if he'll be telling that the rate of 1 quintal of sugar for 1 kilogram of sugar, obviously you won't be purchasing. You'll be very vigilant. In fact, you'll be vigilant enough that last time I had purchased it at that price, and now you are asking me for like 2 rupees more. Why are you asking that? How many times are we vigilant enough in the case of public monies? We should ask ourselves. And we should ask ourselves in all the cases that we deal with. We may be under very much pressure in all the cases, but these are the basic fundamentals on which we should. Now, the second thing is the expenditure should not be prima facie more than the occasion demands. Many times, the occasion demands something less, but our expenditure is much more. This is not correct. And obviously, this is derived from the first point itself. If we have to get a work done in our home for using our own money, we will try to do it in as less as possible. We will go, let's say we have to get our door repaired. So will not simply change the door. We'll try to repair the door. But how many times is it done in the government? Now, the third point is no authority should exercise its powers of sanctioning expenditure to pass an order which will be directly or indirectly to its own advantage. If I am sanctioning an expenditure in which it is directly or indirectly going in my own advantage, my own advantage means my advantage of in my personal capacity. It's not the advantage. So suppose you are in your office and you are sanctioning expenditure for the purchase of furniture for your office. That is not in your own advantage. Not uh, it is not benefiting you in your personal capacity. It's for your chamber. And after you will be transferred from that post, someone else will come to that post. So that will be the advantage. That will be for the post at which you are holding, and that is a government post, a delegated post. So that will not be counted as your own advantage. Expenditure from public money should not be incurred for the benefit of a particular person or a section of people, unless a claim for the amount could be imposed in court of law or the expenditure is in pursuance of a recognized policy or custom. This is quite self-explanatory. The amount of allowances granted to meet expenditure of a particular type should be so regulated that the allowances are not on the whole a source of profit to the recipients. That means that if we are going to make an expenditure, so the allowances should not be completely a source of profit. If we are going for a tenders or contracts and the cost of the contract is such that the complete cost is equal to the profit of the contract, that is wrong. So these are the canons of financial propriety that this help us decide whether our decision is right or wrong in any particular situation. Apart from this, second was the GFR. Now, what is GFR? GFR is General Financial Rules. General Financial Rules are given by Department of Expenditure, Ministry of Finance. You might be wondering why are we discussing rule that is given by Ministry of Finance, since we all come under Ministry of Railways. Now, after the Railways budget has been merged with General Budget, you should know that the whole Indian budget is a single thing. So Ministry of Finance, the directions of Ministry of Finance will be applicable to us also. It is a different matter that the Railway Board will issue guidelines depending on the circulars that are issued by Ministry of Finance. But as far as GFR is concerned, General Financial Rules, there is a circular in 2018 that GFR are also applicable on Indian Railways. GFR is a very good manual, I must say, for officers, especially if you get any time. You should read it, GFR, or maybe you should read it in parts. GFR is full of the fundamental principles on which the public money must be spent. So GFR Rule 144 tells about the fundamental principles of public buying. What are the fundamental principles of public buying? The description of the subject matter of procurement to the extent practicable, objective, functional, generic, and measurable, and specified technical, qualitative, and performance characteristics, and also not indicate a requirement for a particular trademark, trade name, or brand. So in the third case study, I was telling that in its specification, it was written that the material was to be supplied as per the catalog of a particular brand. Now, as you can see clearly in the GFR rule number 144, a second, that description of the subject matter of procurement must not indicate a requirement of a particular trademark, trade name, or brand. Also, it is written that to the extent practical, unless it is impractical to not indicate a requirement, you should not indicate. So if you have a generic specification, you should use the generic specification. And if you don't have a generic specification, there is some item which you don't know what is the specification of that item, not specifications are not available in the public, then you can go for the trademark or trade. For example, in common parlance, the photocopy machine is also known as Xerox. Now, what if we go for a non-stock demand and we write in the description that we need a Xerox machine? Obviously, that will be wrong. So Xerox in itself is a company. Xerox is not a machine; it's a photocopy machine, and the photocopy machine has its own specifications. So if you are writing a Xerox machine, that will be wrong. Now, coming to point B, the specification in terms of quality, type, etc., has also quantity of clearly spelled out, keeping in view the specific needs of the procuring organizations. The specifications so worked out should meet the basic needs of organization without including superfluous and non-essential features which may result in unwarranted expenditure. These points are more related to the non-stop purchases that we had as far as technical departments are. So it is written that the specifications that we are writing for the procurement of the goods, they should be clearly spelled out. And while writing the specification, we should keep in view the specific needs of the procurement. And it should not be superfluous or non-essential features should not be written, so that unwarranted expenditure can be avoided. For example, we have to purchase, let's say, a water cooler, a desert cooler, let's say. And if we write non-essential features like Wi-Fi enabled desert cooler. Now, why in the world we need a Wi-Fi enabled desert? That is kind of a non-essential. We should not write something like that. Or maybe we are going for a tenders and contracts and we we are writing some specifications which are very non-essential or superfluous in nature. Offer should be invited following a fair, transparent, and reasonable procedure. Procuring entity should be satisfied that the selected offer adequately meets the requirement in all respects. The procuring entity should satisfy itself that the price of the selected offer is reasonable, consistent with the quality required. At each stage of procurement, the concerned procuring entity must place on record in precise terms the consideration which weighed it while making the procurement decision. The point number H. At each stage of procurement, the concerned procuring entity must place on record the consideration which weighed with it while taking the procurement decision. Why did you went for purchasing that particular? So the need for it. If you are going for a non-stop demand, you should be clear about these points. And if you are taking an approval on the noting side, you should write those things. You should never shy away from writing clearly in the noting side or maybe in the letter. Whatever is in your mind, it should come on the paper. That is why it is called a speaking note. A speaking note should speak for itself. It should not be like, okay, I write for, okay, forwarded or approved. Yeah, now the approving authority will write approved if in case you are forwarding it. Mostly we don't write anything, we just sign. That is wrong. If you think that, okay, whatever is, if you are forwarding it, you think that whatever written is, or whatever is written above is right and you agree to it, then okay, you can just write, okay, forwarded or agree to it. But if you are not agreeing to the complete picture, you can question on the noting. You can ask for more details, or you can write your own comments. This is very important. As a government officer or government official, you are on your seat to take decision. We are posted here because a computer cannot do our job. If every file will have to be simply forwarded with sign, it can be done via a computer also. Artificial intelligence is. So why is government paying us? It is paying us so that the decisions that we are taking should be public interest. We can do this by keeping these principles in our mind. A complete schedule of procurement cycle from date of issuing the tender to date of issuing the contract will be published in the tender. Now, the third thing is Appendix 1 to the GFR Rule number 37. Instructions for regulating the enforcement of responsibility for losses, etc. In GFR Rule number 37, it is written that in case decision of an officer has caused decision of an officer or official, I'm telling official in itself contains all the persons from group C, group D to group A officers. So Official means everyone. So if decision of an official has caused loss to the public money, loss to the railways, what should be done in this case, or what are the guidelines regarding this? The cardinal principle governing the assessment of responsibility is that every government officer should exercise the same vigilance in respect of expenditure from public fund, generally as a person of ordinary prudence would exercise respect of expenditure in the study of his own. So as you can see, this paragraph has been taken from the canons of financial propriety. As I said there also, that canons of financial propriety should always be in your mind. And every decision that you are taking, it should occur to you that whether I am taking the decision according to the canons of financial propriety or not. In case you find that the decision is not according to the canons of financial propriety, you should be very cautious. You should judge the merits and demerits of the case. You should discuss with your seniors, and if needed, you should write it in the comments that I think this so and so thing should be improved, because it will lead to increased spending of the public. Now, while the competent authority may in special cases condone an officer's honest errors of judgment involving financial loss, if the officer can show that he has acted in good faith and done his best up to the limits of his ability and experience, personal liability shall be strictly enforced against all officers who are dishonest, careless, or negligent in their duties and responsibilities. Unless you, yeah, that's what I was saying, that you should write your mind in the noting. By writing your mind in the noting, you may be able to prove that your the judgment of errors was an honest mistake. It was not your qualified intention in that case. And unless you prove that, personal liability shall be strictly enforced against the officer. And not only dishonest, careless, or negligent. In a case that we are doing right now, it is found that in a workshop, a part that is a part of an ICF has been repaired at 1.5 times the cost. I mean, there are two different items. Both items are interchangeable. One item comes at a smaller price, like 50,000 or unit price, and the other one comes at a higher price, like 1 lakh unit price. Both of these items are interchangeable. Now, what happened is an officer, he repaired the higher cost item, that the 1 lakh, the item with unit value of 1 lakh. He got it repaired at rupees 92,000. Not only the repairing cost is huge, it is much higher than the interchangeable item that is always available at rupees 50,000, and that is the new item. Also, the 50,000 rupees unit item is a stock item, and the 1 lakh rupees item is not even stock. So these kind of cases are, even if he has done it negligent or carelessly, he's doing loss to the public money, and these kind of losses will eat up the organization, and this must be avoided at all costs. In cases where loss is due to delinquencies of subordinate officials and where it appears that this has been facilitated by laxity of supervision on part of a superior officer, the latter shall also be called strictly to account and his personal liability in the matter carefully assessed. Sometimes the seniors will say, okay, what can we do? The supervisor has done this. For example, in the first case study that we had discussed, the unit of measurement was wrongly written by the supervisor who had made the estimated scope. The officer can say, I have not made the scope. The so and so supervisor has made it, so it is not my liability, it's not my responsibility. Obviously, he cannot say, as written in the third paragraph, that if it appears that this has been facilitated by laxity of supervision on part of the superior officer, he will also be held. So in the first case study, the officer was also responsible because he is approving the estimate, he is approving the scope, or he is also signing it. So he cannot say that I have not made it. Okay, you have approved it. Your purpose was to supervise that preparation, and you have not done it properly. So you are also responsible. Question of enforcement. enforcing pecuniary liability shall always be considered as well as question of other forms of disciplinary action. In deciding the degree of an officer's pecuniary liability, it will be necessary to look not only to circumstances of case, but also to financial circumstances. Some cases where there is loss to the railway revenue, pecuniary liability will also be. But it is better, it is a good point that is written here is that we should not only look at the circumstances of the case, but we should also look at the financial circumstances of it. Suppose an officer has caused a loss of, let's say, 1 crore to me. What if that 1 crore is said to be recovered from that salary of the officer? I mean, he will be bankrupt. So it is written here that financial circumstances of the officer should also be considered. Now, we will discuss some important CBC guidelines regarding tenders and contracts. I will go through them quickly. Most of the guidelines are self-explanatory in nature. You can read them. If you happen to have any questions regarding these guidelines, so the pre-qualification criteria should be ensured that the pre-qualification criteria are exhaustive yet specific, and there is fair competition. Quite often people ask me, I want to add some condition in the tender document. Should I do that? Answer to that question lies in this paragraph. You have to decide whether the pre-qualification criteria are ensuring fair competition or not. Whether you are writing, whether you are giving a pre-qualification criteria that is too restrictive in nature. By giving a too restrictive condition, you will hamper the competition, and it should not happen unless you have a valid justification. The acceptance or rejection of any bid should not be arbitrary, not justified grounds as per the laid down specification. Now there is a tender sample clause. It is written that sometimes some may think that okay, we have to procure some item, but we don't have a proper specification for that. Suppose we want to purchase a particular color, maybe a bulb of particular colored light. We don't have proper specification for that. We want to see a sample of that. So how to go? That is written in this. That government departments organization should consider procurement of such item on the basis of only of detailed specification. You should not ask for samples while before the tender gets finalized. After the tenders get finalized, you can write in the tender document that this case the sample will have to be approved before supplying the complete. That's what the thing says.
Sir.
Yes.
Sorry, sir. Sorry for interrupting you. I actually have one question about this point that you said, sir, the sampling clause. Sir, if you could just for 1 second, so just go to the previous slide, please, sir. Sir, actually, my question is basically in 2 parts. You said that the sampling should or approval of samples should not be required at the time of tender finalization. But sir, and we have mentioned the government department should consider detailed specifications. So many times we are forming those detailed specifications on the basis of the sample. So for example, if you are looking for, if we are making a specification of, just for example, our office furniture, let us say. So for example, here in IRIMEE, we buy a lot of classroom furniture from time to time, and that is on the card just now, because so when we buy those desks and chairs and black and whiteboard and that kind of thing for an empty classroom, then we will be forming our specification or framing our requirement based on the existing samples that are available in the market. So, and then at the time of tender floating, if somebody quotes something generic, then how are we supposed to justify that without looking at the sample first? Or should it be done unofficially?
You are writing the specifications in the document.
Yes, sir. We are writing the specifications that it should be a table of this particular size with movable something or the other, and this color, light beige color kind of thing, and table and chair should be of this width, and we are writing, and on steel legs, we are writing all of that for classroom. And whiteboard should be this dimension by this dimension with minimum finish, minimum क्या कहते हैं, DFT of washable material, so many millimeters, warranty up to 1 year. We are writing all of that, sir. But we are taking that specification from an existing material available in the market.
Okay.
Basically from a BQ. So at the time of just now, though, we are just in the specification stage. But later when we frame the tender and we float it, sir, then how, if somebody quotes something generic, something very, without any company name or without anything that we can actually decide if it is okay. And these are general purpose items, desks and chairs and whiteboard. So how should we do that, sir?
I mean, you are writing the specifications in your tender document. So whenever the tenderer is giving his offer, he'll give the offer according to that specification.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So
give a technical deviation or not? Yes, sir.
Yes, he can always give a technical deviation. If there are no technical deviations, then we have to assume that what he is going to supply is according to the specifications that are given. I don't think there is any problem in this case. What I'm writing a specification.
Sir.
I mean, we are making the specification from a sample itself. It doesn't matter. Whatever specification we have written, the person who is offering, he has to supply according to those. In case he supplies something that is not according to our specifications, then the material will be rejected.
But for general purpose items, generic types of general purpose items, it becomes very difficult to see if something is according to specification just by, they will say we are offering a table of this size by this size on steel legs. Now, whether that is actually what we need or not, or if it is something very inferior quality, we cannot tell without knowing the sample, which is not the case with like a TNP item or something else, which is slightly more specific.
In that case, just what is written in this slide also, if required, provision for submission of an advance sum by successful bidders may be stipulated for indeterminable parameters, such as shade, tone, size, material, finish, and workmanship, before giving clearance for bulk production of the supply. So, I don't know whether this provision is in JEM or not right now.
Sir, I'll have to check that, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, before supply of the material, we want to see the sample. We want to see one sample. And if the sample is according to our specification, we'll have to get anything. I don't know, because you can see that this guideline is very old. It's
Sir. Yes, you are right. So that about the, yes, we can take the successful bidder and then we can say okay, sample. Okay, right.
Exactly.
Got it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
So use of products with standard specifications. So that's what we are discussing, that items with non-standard specifications are to be procured. Reasoning for procuring such items may be recorded, and reasonability of the rates must be checked before placing it. So obviously, sometimes we have to purchase some non-standard specification items. There might be some reasons for that. So we should always record the reasoning. Writing on the noting, I cannot emphasize enough that how much important is to write everything that is on your mind. It's very important. So time-bound processing of procurement. It is essential that tenders are finalized and contracts are awarded in a time-bound manner with original validity of the tender without seeking further extension. In case of tenders and contracts, we should always try that the tender gets finalized within the original validity period. And it is important to fix the period of validity for that. Agents. Sometimes it happens that a firm can bid on behalf of a OEM. But it should not happen that a firm is also bidding in the same tender and the OEM is also bidding in the same tender. So this should not happen. Second thing is, if an agent submits bid on behalf of an OEM, the same agent cannot submit a bid on behalf of another OEM in the same tender. So a firm cannot bid on behalf of two different OEMs in the same tender. So this should be kept in. Now, what happens if L1 party backs out? L1 party means the lowest tender, lowest eligible tender. L1 party backs out. There should be retendering in a transparent and fair. Now, post-tender negotiation. This is an important point, and this is the oft-quoted paragraph of CVC guidelines that there should not be any negotiation. Negotiations, if at all, shall be an exception, and only in the case of proprietary items or in the case of items with limited sources. Negotiations shall be held with L1 only. In case of inability to obtain the desired results by way of education, sorry, it is reduction in rates. By way of reduction in rates and negotiations in structures, satisfactory explanations are required to be recorded by committee who recommended them. That means, in case the committee recommended that negotiation should be done and the negotiations fail, in that case, that the committee has to record the reasons why it recommended negotiations and it has failed. Because by recommending negotiations, have increased the period of finalization of the tender, and unnecessary increase in the period of finalization of tender should not happen. That was, it was unnecessary. You went for negotiation. You without thinking or properly applying your mind, you went for negotiation. This is a wrong practice, and it should not. The committee shall be responsible for lack of application of mind in case its negotiations have only unnecessarily delayed the award of work. Accordingly, the model time frame for according such a completion of entire process of award of tender should not exceed 1 month from date of submission of recommendation. In case of L1 backing out, there should be now pre-award stage. This is kind of a checklist, the points that should be checked, that should be kept in mind while you are dealing with tenders and contracts cases. That in pre-award stage, the adequate and wide publicity is very important. In fact, in case of quotations, what happens is that the quotation is a very common procedure that happens all over Indian railways. In this case, publicity should be ensured. At least the quotation notice, the letter inviting quotation should be pasted on the notice. It is important. It should not happen that the quotations, if you are inviting quotations, only you should know or the firm should know. It should be available on the notice board. Now, pre-qualification criteria are properly defined and notified with experience certificate submitted. These are the checklists you can read and you can find, understand it yourself. Then in the post-award stage, agreement, it is important that agreement is page numbered, signed and sealed properly. Bank guarantees verified commission. Most of these things are already directed to us, and most of these things are done. But these are according to the CVC guide. Action for levy of liquidated damages taken in case of. Now, in case of payments to contractor, price escalation is paid only as per contract. Retention money, security deposit detected as per contract. Recovery of mobilization equipment advance. Recovery of income tax and works contract. Glaring deviations are supported. In post-award stage, site record, proper system of recording compliance of instruction issued to the contractor. It is important, very important. In many cases, we have seen that proper system of recording is not. Supervisor don't make proper ledgers, they don't make proper records, the material passing register is not made sometimes, the daily material transaction register is not made. And by not making registers, they don't, the accountant of material or accountant of work is not ensured. In that case, the supervisor, the officer who has not ensured that proper records are made. Proper record of hindrances is, the record of hindrances should also be maintained so that why the work got delayed can be identified later. Mandatory tests are carried out as per frequency prescribed. So now these are the common irregularities that are very common. Without urgency and for execution report. These are just common items and you can go through it. If anyone has any questions, you can ask me. If we have like 5-10 minutes. Consideration of tender by TC. What if L1 withdraws? We know that if L1 withdraws, then we tender. What is the role of convener in it? Knowledge of the work to execute. The point that was present in the third case study. That convener is also responsible that whether he knows about the site conditions or not. All the special features are known to him. Specifications of the work are. He should brief the TC. Finance, what is the role of finance? Finance member is to ensure that the earnest money is as per demand and in acceptable form. He has to ensure that the offer is automatically correct. He should also ensure that what is the position of funds, whether we'll be able to pay in case the work gets done, and also whatever if is there any legal issue. And being a common member, he has to ensure that a uniform and consistent approach is to be adopted in dealing. So accounts member is common across department. He knows what is happening in mechanical department and electrical department. It should not happen that in mechanical department something is happening and in electrical department something else is happening. That has to be ensured by the role of third member. Third member must ensure that rules are followed. The third member cannot be can devolve from his responsibilities. He has also to check the reasonableness of rates. Uniform and consistent approach has been adopted in dealing tender. He is also apply. He should also apply his independent mind because he is equally responsible. Role of TC as a whole. It is a collective responsibility of the TC to give a definite recommendation. Clearly specify reasons, background, and valid apprehensions is the basis of it. You should know that in case of vigilance case happens and it finds that the recommendation of TC were not correct or there were some malified intentions involved, that the complete TC as a whole is made responsible. It doesn't happen that only the executive member or only the finance member is responsible. TC is any kind of committee. The decision taken by if a decision is taken by a committee, then all the members of the committee are equally responsible. No one can say that he was the senior member or he was the chairman. What is the role of tender accepting? Tender accepting authority is finally and ultimately responsible for the acceptance, although the TC is also responsible. So tender accepting authority is like an umbrella. Checks that work is essentially required, opportunities given to all the tenderers, technical suitability and reasonableness of rates has been looked after by TC or not, that is checked by TA. Any other special features that are there. So that was all in the presentation. And I've tried that the aspects that are related to vigilance in tenders and contracts has been included in the presentation. Obviously, it cannot be exhaustive and complete, but I have tried to cover as much. Now, if there are any questions, we will take those. I think someone is saying something. Your voice is very low. If you want, you can write in the chat box. I think there are no questions. Participants, do we have any questions here?
Participant, please ask questions, please. At the end of the lecture, sir is asking, please ask questions. Otherwise, you can write in the chat box.
I don't think.
I think, sir, there is no question from participant side.
Okay, so can we close the session?
Yes, sir. You can, sir, close, sir.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the participants for patiently listening to this lecture. And I also want to thank the faculties of IRIMEE Jamalpur for inviting me for this lecture. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir, for giving your valuable time, sir. You also gave your valuable time in explaining the cases related to vigilance, and also some participants interact with you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.